Hello lads and welcome to yet another video. Now, before I start this video, let me explain the long and probably convoluted way of how I got to think about this subject which I'm going to be talking about. Now, very recently, I have only just finished reading the James Goss book, Doctor Who and the Cricket Men, which is based off the Lost Adventure by Douglas Adams. I've done a giant video about why I was excited about it. You can go and watch that if you want, but long and short of it, now I've finished it, I adore it, I love it. And one of the things that I most like about it is James Goss's writing style and how he has perfectly captured Douglas's techniques as when he was writing for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like, reading through this, if you didn't tell me it was James Goss, I would have absolutely thought it was Douglas Adams. Like, there's a bit in it in sort of the third act. There's a sentence like, for the all purposes of suspense or something, we'll get back to these two later, when it just introduces a character. And it's just worded exactly like Adams, and I really admire the writing style of it that James Goss has managed to achieve. And then I thought, writing books. I thought of authors, I thought of writers, I thought of script writers, I thought of Doctor Who script writers. Then I thought of Doctor Who script writers that haven't written for Doctor Who in a fair while, and I would love to see them back. Here we are, is the video subject. So yeah, I'm just going to go through a list of writers which have only written a couple of stories for Doctor Who and who are in desperate need of a return, because I feel like they could introduce like even more good stories to it. I think I worded that right, yep. It took me a while, but I got there. So without further ado, let's start this little wish list of mine for people I'd love to see return for Doctor Who. Ideally for the 13th Doctor's era, but if not, something else. Now, the first person on my list, and I'm genuinely surprised he hasn't come back already, like, the last time we saw him was in the 10th Doctor's era, and get ready for this, that was over 10 years ago. I think it started over 10 years ago anyway. But his last story was Human Nature and Family of Blood, and his only other story that he wrote for televised Doctor Who was Father's Day. I am, of course, talking about Paul Cornell. Now, both Father's Day and the Family of Blood two-parter, they have the amazing ability to make you absolutely howl. Not with laughter, with, crying. And they are very emotionally impactful, and Paul Cornell certainly knows how to portray sadness. He gets you to empathise with characters, and he gets you to sort of feel for characters over a very short amount of time. Because if you think of it, Father's Day, that was the introduction to Pete Tyler, and it got you to feel for him and care for him in just a 45-minute slot. So when the time he eventually came to face his death, you felt sorry for him and you cried along with Rose. And in a similar aspect to the Family Blood two-part, even though it's two parts, you still get introduced to Joan, and in a sort of sense you're introduced to John Smith, the Doctor's human alter ego, if you like. And you feel for them, you feel for their relationship, you see it build over time, so when the climax comes, you feel for them and you do have a bit of a sad moment. Paul Cornell can write sadness brilliantly. He can get an audience to feel for his characters and want them to get out of situations. He makes the audience engage with the characters, and this is what we need back. Now, I'm not saying bring him on full-time every other episode of every other series or anything like that, because I do think that episodes like the ones he writes are best in effect when they come around like every once in a while, so you're not just constantly bombarded with emotion. Like a sort of jewel in a haystack, if you like. It's just that one rare occasion, and it hits you so hard that you're overwhelmed with the emotion, you think, wow, this is good. I'm not saying that every other episode, apart from Paul Cornell's ones, should be absolute trash, but if he can write that well in emotion, then if we have every other one as a sort of light-hearted romp, then that will sort of exacerbate the extremeness of the emotions that he's trying to portray very well. That was a lot of words. Ooh. Next on my list is another writer who only penned 2 stories for Doctor Who, but he has been active more recently, but not too recently. His last time being active was in Series 6. He wrote The Girl Who Waited, and he also wrote The Rise of the Cybermen two-parter for the 10th Doctor's era. And this person is Tom McRae. Now, I think we can all agree that, at least in New Who's terms, The Rise of the Cybermen two-parter is the best. Cyberman story in the world of Doctor Who. I think that the Cyberwoman story in Torchwood is the best, but you know, that's Torchwood, it don't count. But again, Tom McRae is very good at portraying emotion. Not as good as Paul Cornell, I think, but he still has those moments. You've got this grand epic of an adventure with these tiny little moments spliced in, and it works too well. It doesn't feel forced. I think of the Age of Steel, and it's one of my favourite moments in Series 2 of New Who, and I'm surprised more people don't talk about it. It's when the Doctor removes the Cybermen's emotional inhibitor, and the voice of the person before she was converted just speaks. It's like, where's my fiancé? Oh god, that hits right here. But yeah, I think if we can make him write for the Cybermen again, he will do it wonderfully, because I think he knows how to write for the Cybermen. I've done a video about how the Cybermen should be written. Check that out if you want the full thoughts on how they should be written. But I think everything I talk about in there is something that Tom McRae can do and does do. As I say, his only other broadcast story that he wrote for Doctor Who was The Girl Who Waited in Series 6, and I think this is an underrated gem. It is buried under the atrocities of Series 6, but Series 6 does have some beautiful moments in there and some brilliant stories. I think of The Girl Who Waited, The God Complex, The Doctor's Wife, things like that, and The Girl Who Waited is one of my favourites in Series 6 because it's such a unique idea, and this is what Doctor Who's all about. It's all about unique ideas. How can we use time and science fiction to create an individual and unique story? It also shows Tom McRae's diversity in his writing, because The Girl Who Waited is worlds apart from The Rise of the Cybermen two-parter. So it shows that he can do a lot of genres, if it were. And I think what's interesting to note about Tom McRae is that he did do a third script for Doctor Who, which was supposed to be in Series 4. You might have heard of it. It was called Century House, and the basic plot was that the Doctor would be on a sort of Most Haunted style programme while Donna was watching at home, and it was intended to be a more comedic episode, but they already had a comedic episode in the series with the Unicorn and the Wasp, so the episode got scrapped and it got replaced with Midnight, which, to be fair, I would have made that sacrifice. But if he can do comedy, and if the only reason the episode was scrapped is because there was another comedy episode in the series, then, you know, I'd like to see his comedic side. And if he can intersplice the sort of emotional aspects that he included in The Girl Who Waited and in The Rise of the Cybermen two-parter, if you can put those in a comedy story, I think that'd be brilliant, and I think that'd be a lovely episode. Next on the list is a man who really doesn't need an introduction, because everyone knows and loves his one story that he wrote for Doctor Who, and this one story, some consider it the best Dalek story of the Revive series. I'd consider it the best Dalek story ever. Of course, I'm talking about Dalek, with Robert Shearman at the pen. Now, Dalek, I don't really need to explain the story. It's the best Dalek story. It gave the Daleks a new life. It made them scary again. Along with Parting of the Ways, this is the Daleks at their best, and Robert Shearman helped make that. And, of course, Dalek isn't his only contribution to Who. He's done a lot of Big Finish work, and he's done some of their best stories, some of their more acclaimed stories. I'm thinking The Holy Terror, The Chimes of Midnight, which was released in vinyl. He done, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Chesno? Bottom line is, he's a good writer, and I had the privilege of seeing him at the Dimensions convention in, I think it was 2016, where he talked about his thought process behind making the Daleks scary, and he knows what he's on about. He knows his stories, and he knows what makes them good, and he knows how to write well, and we need him back in Doctor Who. I can't remember what he said about his return to the televised series of Doctor Who, but he did say that he might be making a return to Big Finish, so that's lovely. Next on this, and I'm going to link this back to the beginning of the video where I've done that big convoluted introduction about why I'm talking about this, is James Goss, who hasn't actually written a televised episode of Doctor Who, but I'm going to explain why I want to see him write for it. Now, I'd say that James is most known for his books. I mentioned The Cricket Men. He also done the City of Death novelisation, which is up there. He done The Pirate Planet. He also done one of the Class books. Yeah, I think it was What She Does Next Will Astound You. I haven't read that and have no intention to, but, you know, sure. And what I like most about his style of writing is his sense of comedy, because even though from the books I've read, the Douglas Adams adaptations, most of the jokes were set up by Adams, he adds so much to it, and he still makes you laugh while you're reading it. Well, you know what's going to happen if you've seen the stories, and you know the plot, and you know the jokes, and you know the punchlines. It still makes you laugh, because he puts a new spin on it. And he hasn't only done books, James Goss, he also done some of the animated the stories. He done The Infinite Quest, which was like a kids, I think it was for Totally Doctor Who back in 2007 with David Tennant and Freema Agyeman. I always say that wrong. And he also done Scream of the Shalka, which was in the Richard E. Grant Ninth Doctor back in the Wilderness years. And I think that just those two stories shows his diversity. He can write whatever's required of him. He can do child-friendly, which Doctor Who does need, it's a family show, that's another argument, and he can do serious. He has great range, but the main reason I want him to write for the show is because he is primarily an author for novelisations, for Doctor Who novelisations, for BBC Books. He does that sort of area, and I think if we let him in to write, even if it's a mediocre story for a TV show, pardon me, it will open up the gate for a lot more writers and authors to be introduced to the show, because you've got some brilliant novelisation authors out there. I think of Trevor Baxendale, who done Prisoner of the Daleks, which is one of my favourite Doctor Who books. I'm thinking of, you know, all the others. If we allow them in on the show, because they make great plots, they do great characters, they do great arcs for characters and stories. If we can let them in just to write a little episode now and again, I'd adore that. That'd be brilliant. That'd be fantastic. And I'm going to save the writer that I'd most like to see for Doctor Who for last, which is this one. Now, he wrote my favourite Matt Smith story, and possibly, at a push, one of my favourite stories since the Revive series, and it's Vincent and the Doctor, which was written by, it was only one contribution to Doctor Who, by the way, and it was written by Richard Curtis, of all people. Now, if you don't know who Richard Curtis is, not only did he write Vincent and the Doctor, but he also wrote, he done Not the 9 O'Clock News, he done Blackadder, he done About Time, he done Mr. Bean, he done Love Actually, for Christ's sake. Everyone knows Love Actually, everyone loves Love Actually, and Richard Curtis wrote it. And he also wrote Vincent and the Doctor. I didn't realise that it was him who wrote Vincent and the Doctor until a couple of weeks ago, and when I found out, I was just like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. But not only, it's not just a big name in Doctor Who, it's not just an established writer writing for Doctor Who, but he's an established writer for a reason. He writes stories that everybody loves. And we need stories that everybody loves, because not only does he write for the Doctor Who fan, because he's not primarily targeted at a Doctor Who fan in the same way that maybe Stephen Moffat or Mark Gatiss or even Russell T Davies writes for. He writes for the general audience, he writes for everyone, he writes for literally everyone can come in, I feel, and watch a Richard Curtis story, that you don't have to be indulged in sci-fi, and I'm just primarily basing this off not only Vincent and the Doctor but his other works. He's a broad writer and he can do that, and he's brilliant. I love Richard Curtis, and not just because he wrote Vincent and the Doctor, all the other works that I explained. He is an established writer and he needs to come back, and if we get him in, who knows what other writers we could get in. We could get Stephen Fry back. Remember when he was supposed to write a story for Doctor Who and that never sort of came through? It was supposed to be written for Series 2, then it got pushed back to Series 3, and then it just got forgotten in time. If we have Richard Curtis back again, then maybe we can get Stephen Fry back again to actually do another story. We can do all sorts of writers, all sorts of published writers, screenwriters. If we get Anthony McCartan in, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but if we could get... and Richard, please come back. But, of course, I'm going through all these writers who I'd love to see back. I'm aware that we're not only are we getting introduced to a new series, but obviously a new Doctor, a new showrunner, a new era, and obviously I think that what's going to come with that is new writers. And I am, for one, am looking forward to this new talent, these new stories that these new writers are going to write, and I am looking forward to the fact that maybe in 5-10 years I'm going to be gushing over them and saying that they need to come back to Doctor Who because their stories were brilliant, and I have total faith in the new writers that should be coming in. But, you know, having these lads back would be alright. I think a nice little combination of people being brought back and new talent would be a recipe for perfection. So yeah, thanks for listening. Have you got any writers that you'd like to see come back? Let me know in the comments. Well, I say let me know, just put it in the comments, because, you know, as per, I don't really care. But yeah, have a good old time, have some fun, have a nice time. I am rambling. How do I end videos? I really need to sort that problem out one day.